Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It is time once again for my weekly chatty catch up on everything I read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit chat and catch up on my week this week. I don't have any books to hold up for you today, not because I didn't finish anything, but because everything was up against deadlines at the library. So I did successfully finish things out and return them, but it means I don't have physical books here. That is fine. We will put the covers up on the screen. Hi, Yelly Cat is here to say hello. She's just hopped. Yelly Cat is doing very well. This is Isabella, Yelly Isabelli, and she's had some health issues. She's my foster, but she's doing really, really well and on the mend. So we're just trying to get her stable so she can go back to the shelter. And yeah, as you can see, we're in the living room. So she is out and about quite a bit now outside of her foster room. And that's very exciting. Anyway, this has been a detour. So I was talking about books. The first book, let's talk about. Actually, I had almost opposite reading experiences with my first two books. I enjoyed both of them though. So Archangels of Funk by Andrea Hairston is an Afrofuturist sci-fi. And I did not realize going into this that it was very, very closely tied to her Cinnamon Jones series, or it's part of her Cinnamon Jones series, and the main character is Cinnamon Jones. But I knew that this could be read on its own as a contained story, more or less, and I would say that's true, but you should know going in, if you want to start from the beginning, there are two books that are connected with this that already are out there. Redwood and Wildfire is like a significant prequel, and that is her grandparents' story, and then We'll Do Magic for Small Change. I'm not sure on the plot entirely of that one, but it does connect to this one. So this is the story of a festival. Cinnamon is kind of throwing this festival that her grandparents wanted to do to sort of bolster community and really bring people together in celebrating what their goal for the future is and what they want out of their community. And that's mainly in this sort of futuristic, it's an Afrofuturist book, world that is a dystopia very much outside. And you get the sense surrounding this community of a lot of threat, a lot of breakdown in society, but within there's so much hope. And they've established a co-op. They've taken over kind of an old mall space, it seems like, and there's people in a living space. They're working together to garden and grow food. They're schooling children successfully, and you can feel that sense of community coming together. And so this festival is just all about Cinnamon creating this space to celebrate that. One of the odd things, I couldn't get a sense for like how big and how serious this festival was. At one point, she does actually say she's hoping over 1,000 people will be there. So that's a pretty decent sized event. It's not tiny, right? But everything seems to be getting in the way of it. So we are following, I think it's 4 days. It's just a couple of days in the lead up to and after the festival. And each part is labeled for which day it is. And it's chaos. So Cinnamon is constantly being disrupted by duties that she has to take care of in the community. She's running around. She will hear somebody maybe in distress and go to check that out when she's trying to do something to do with the festival. There are people who are after her because she is a technologist. She's a developer, basically, who has created this technology that's really in demand or in desire to an unsavory element. And so people are sort of coming after her, and that's disrupting things. And I loved all of that. Like, that was great fun, and I loved the world building of it. But I also really struggled with just how free-willing she is about everything, and that she is disorganized. This has a very ADHD feel that I don't really get along with. So I was cringing internally at the level of disorganization because she's like getting shirts printed the day before the festival, and I was like, what are you doing? She seems to let herself get derailed constantly, and I was really struggling with that, just being internally uncomfortable because I like to be on top of things, and she very much was not. She's trying to gather people up and get them to practice and getting them costumes at the very last minute. And there are always those sort of last minute details in anything that you're putting on. If you've ever been involved in shows or event planning, like there's always some of that. But this was truly just she's throwing it together at the last minute, it felt like, which didn't feel like it had the weight and honor that it was due. We also had this moment of like after the festival, people coming to her and telling her how amazing and life-changing the festival was. And I felt like we missed all of that on the page. I didn't get any of that on the page. I was like, well, what was so amazing? It just felt like a bunch of people coming together and kind of being arty. And that is great. And it did have a sense of community, but I didn't see anything there that was this big life-changing event. So I don't know. I feel like maybe I failed to connect with it because I enjoyed the story, I enjoyed the world building, but so much about the execution I struggled with, because this is so, as I said, the disorganized element comes through really strongly, and not just in the character, in the flitting about of the storytelling. It also has an element in how it's told that feels kind of cyberpunk, though there isn't specifically anything here that is strongly cyberpunk, but things like proper nouns. Every page is littered with capitalized proper nouns, and I really struggled with that, just being so pervasive. It seemed very different from what I'd previously read from Hairston in it was more poetic, her writing in Master of Poisons, whereas here there is a beauty to it, but it's really sharp and short, really punctuated sentences, I think. And so the writing didn't click with me as much. I also really felt like we kept getting disrupted because we were changing perspectives. And one of the strengths, I think, for this was that I enjoyed we had 2 dog perspectives and these little bots that Cinnamon has made. Though we're not in first person, so it didn't feel like different minds that we're in or truly foreign perspectives. Everything being in third kind of felt the same voice. So I wish we had gotten a lot more difference and variety. We also, in terms of the execution, didn't really have a plot arc. There is the delivery of the festival, but there's these moments of tension. Like I said, she's kind of being beset by different things disrupting her, but everything seems to constantly just diffuse without anything really resolving or the tension ramping up in any way. It's just moments passing. And I think that that's fine, but ultimately, as I said, I kind of found I enjoyed the story, but the way it was told didn't quite click with me. So I think that's where I'm at on that one. It was really interesting, really inventive, creative stuff. And that I think is something I can consistently turn to Hairston for. And now I do need to go back and read the 2 other books that are connected with this, because I did very much enjoy this world and the character. So the next thing that I read was Little Gods by Meng. And this is a literary fiction novel that is set over several decades, from the 1980s to present primarily, and not linearly. And I think that the summary leaned a little heavily into the daughter's perspective aspect, but she's pretty equal with 3 other perspectives as well. And they're telling the story of her mother, Su Lan, who was primarily in China and then a Chinese-American immigrant. And we're using the daughter as kind of a conduit to that story, or as a framing element to that story, because we begin the story at her birth. And why that's important is that she's born on the day of the Tiananmen Square massacre. And so what's interesting about this, and kind of is the foil to my previous book, is that I love the execution of this. Like, everything about this was executed so interestingly, because Su Lan is almost an absence in this book. We start from the perspective of a labor and delivery nurse, it seems. She's manning the nursery in a hospital over 2 days, June 3rd and 4th, 1989, when the massacre was happening. And everything is normal when she comes in, and she has sort of met this woman who has gone into labor, which turns out to be Su Lan, of course. And then as her shift is going by, they're bringing more and more injured people and then bodies filling the hallway outside the nursery. No one is coming to relieve her, and she's not alarmed. She's a nurse, so she's used to emergent situations. She's dealing with the practicalities of having to manage this nursery on her own, and how is she going to deal with it. And that's really the start to this story. And so Su Lan is not really present there in that storytelling at all, but we know what's happening and what's shaping her experience of the day she gave birth. And that's so impactful and unusual, I think. And so we go through this book in a similar way. We go through someone who was not related to her, but was very close, an older woman who basically was sort of living near her and with her. And they had this close relationship as she was raising this daughter alone. And there are so many gaps in Sulan's life where she doesn't confront things, and that creates a space. Things like, we know her husband is gone and hasn't come back, and this child is being raised alone because she's kept her husband's room exactly the same, and it's getting dusty, and there are still the clothes hanging in the closet. And so all of those really minute details in describing are so powerful and yet so simple. I think there's like very obvious choice in what's delivered on the page. And then we sort of jump to the daughter's perspective, and we've jumped from her birth to her mother's death and her preparing to and returning to China in order to see where her mother lived and the things there. And obviously, her mother being deceased means that her mother is an absence in that perspective. She's thinking back on all these things without any direct contact or interaction. And so I just loved the way that was presented. And this is a fairly short book, and yet I felt we got this richness and depth of character even when Sulan is not there. And she's a really complicated character because she's so headstrong and she's out of norms for society at the time. She is a scientist, and initially when we sort of meet her, she's preparing for the sort of high school exam for wrapping up to go to college. And the people perceiving her is one of the guys who is competing against her and kind of attracted to her, but he's there to take the exam and thinks he's going to be at the top and doesn't even realize that she's competition. And it's so interesting to read that because he interacts with her by way of seeing her at the exam, and there's very little there about her herself. Or him actually having direct one-on-one interactions with her. It's really fascinating how much she is built as a character without being actively present, very much. And so there is so much building up the story of her relationships and her going from this high schooler to the person she is when she moves to America. And her life as a parent, her romantic relationships and the complexities of those, and the way that she kind of is a complicated woman of her time. So I enjoyed this very much, but also it's a very quiet book. So while I was enjoying and finding everything about the execution of telling this story super memorable, I don't think there's anything special about this particular story exceptionally that is going to stick with me. So it felt like this could have been about anything and I would have enjoyed it in the same way as far as how it's told. So that's kind of a weird experience and completely the opposite of the previous book where, yeah, I just loved the writing here. So I think that dovetails nicely into my very mid read that I enjoyed, but is not a standout. And that's Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt. This was everywhere on BookTube when it came out, I think. And Hewitt, I believe, had a memoir out previously that everyone was raving about. And I think probably is heavily inspiring this novel. I think it's just a novelization of his memoir. So this is just a quiet coming of age novel about a young man growing up in northern England, a very rural, small town, and he's experiencing coming out as gay, and that experience to go through in a really isolating world. I found this very quiet and very poignant in what it's doing, but I don't think it had a huge impact on me. It felt like there wasn't anything that significantly stood out. And it also felt very much like we have a framing device in this of him as an adult looking back, but so much of this didn't ring true to me as a teenage boy's perspective, more or less. In the story, a very troubled young man has entered the community and come to stay with, I think it's an aunt and uncle, who are close to our main character, James. And James, of course, has his sort of first love, first crush on this boy who's very troublesome, and he's not sure, is this boy actually gay as well? Can I disclose this to him? And it kind of goes back and forth He is dabbling in what he should do and say, and navigating uncharted waters, really, because all of the social norms of this time don't apply to him, more or less. But there's also just a lot of gorgeous writing to this that was very meaningful. So I want to read the short bit about the moment of his coming out with his parents. My father had looked at my mother and said nothing at all, but my mother looked directly at me after I had finished speaking, and she began to cry, gently at first, and then with more real grief, and between the gasps of breath, she had apologized for crying at all. I thought I knew where that grief had come from. I thought it was because I had cheated her out of grandchildren, a wedding, a whole imagined life, and I felt, in a way, like I had bereaved her, not only of a son, but of her own dreams too. I felt like leaving home and not coming back. I had broken a taboo. I had admitted that I had desires, that I was no longer innocent. It was the first time I realized that I could really hurt her, and I felt a churning pain in my chest, as though my heart was clenching and unclenching, so that I took my breath away. I had exposed a distance between the son she knew and the son I really was, and no matter how hard we tried afterwards, it seemed impossible to make the two versions match. So that is deeply impactful and so powerful on the page. But at the same time, I'm sitting there thinking like, yeah, no teenage boy is thinking like this. So I didn't really buy that element that this was in his head at the time. But it's really beautiful. And I think that was maintained through the book. So I enjoyed reading the book, but I don't know how much it's going to completely stick with me, or even be super memorable as I go on, like within a few weeks or months. It's going to be out of my head, I'm sure. But I had a good time with it. So that is what I read this week. As far as what I'm reading, I can't tell you because it's all BookTube Prize. I'm completely focused on wrapping up. I'm started my last book for BookTube Prize, and this is the final week. So I'm getting that wrapped up so I can enter in my rankings for this round. And this is the end of the semi-final, so we will be jumping into the final next month. And that's very, very exciting. We'll be done in the beginning of October. So what else did I do this week? I watched a really, really wonderful movie called Finding Your Feet. And this stars Imelda Staunton. It's a very British film, and it's very mundane, contemporary set story. She is a very posh lady who has sort of given up a lot of her life in service to her husband, who is rich and powerful. And she's very much adapted to that world and made that her whole life, doing everything for him and their family. And then she finds out he's cheating on her with a friend at this big moment for them when he's retiring and they're supposed to be having this new future together. And of course she gets fed up because of that. She sort of walks or runs away to her sister, who is played by Celia Imrie, and has a very, very different life from her. She kind of lives in this very colorful and chaotic life. She doesn't have a lot and is constantly losing things, but she's so joyful and she's so connected with people. And initially, Imelda Staunton's character is really put off and really annoyed and does just kind of wallow in her grief. She wants to be shut down, but eventually Celia Imrie's character pulls her out by taking her to a seniors dance class. And they get connected, they form community and friendships, and Imelda Staunton kind of finds a new life in herself, in something she's really buried as she was going on. So I loved this as sort of starting over in your older life. There was so much joy to this, and Timothy Spall is in this as one of the main characters, and he's also going through some real hard times and has connected through this seniors dancing class as well. And they just really have formed these beautiful friendship relationships. But there's also that older love that's there as well. So there's a slight bit of romance too. But it was just so fun. And I love that this is one of those that has that real optimistic, hopeful, happy story, but without the trite over-saccharine element, because there are really some very difficult moments here. There's facing the end of life and aging, a lot of physical breakdown aspects. Of course, they're old people dancing, and so you run into a lot of the soreness and just pain and difficulties of being older across this, and confronting their friends passing away, dementia, lots of really difficult topics dealt with in a very caring, I think, serious way that was appropriate for a very hopeful, happy film. Loved it. What else? I think that's all for what I watched this week. My week was another very boring week. I'm still struggling to get out of that funk, but I'm feeling a lot better. So hopefully we're near the end of the funkness. I had a kind of a great start to the week though, like really exciting start to the week. I got a dental implant done that has been in progress for a long time, for most of this year. But that was as a result of, I had a crown removed, so I had room for orthodontics. And my orthodontics had pretty much wrapped up, and then the implant this year. And so this has been a 3-year process that's been going on to get all done, to get my lovely smile. So if you haven't been around or you haven't seen some of my older videos, very early on my teeth were quite bad. I had extreme overcrowding on my lower jaw and an overjet in the upper jaw. And now it just is so nice, so fixed, and my smile has turned out absolutely lovely. So I'm very happy with the work, very hard work of my dentist and orthodontist, but we're done, it seems. I have to get a new retainer, so I'm waiting to pick that up, but I have nothing on the books for either my dentist or my orthodontist coming up to do with this. So I'm very, very happy that this long process has finished. And that was just like a hooray moment of relief to be done with. I may try to stitch together some clips of my progress because while I was not very good at standardizing or continuously keeping recorded videos or pictures of everything, I did intermittently take clips and snapshots of my progress of my teeth. So I do have some stuff I can go together if people are interested in seeing what that looks like, because I did Invisalign for pretty much 3 years. I had a very random power outage this week, so that was, I think, the most noteworthy thing other than the dental stuff. That it was pretty much the ideal in that we covered 2 overnights, which is when it's coolest. We've been under heat advisories quite a bit. We had 1 heat advisory that ended just after that. So then the end of this week has been quite a bit cooler, and now we're headed back into heat advisories again. So I think it hit at the right time, but it was still very hot and sticky and not very enjoyable, but we survived, and it was mostly manageable, and nothing got ruined in my fridge or anything. It was not that long. So I think that's all for my week. So let's dive into my recommendations for the week. I have a couple. I haven't for a while. So quickly, the popular thing is the Odyssey. So with the movie out, I know a lot of people have been doing various types of videos, but 2 I wanted to really highlight. We've got Louise Savage, who is a classicist as far as I recall. And she did a video about if you have seen the film and you want to read the Odyssey, some tips and guidance, specifics about that, and mentions of different translations, things like that. So she's taking it from a book aspect. The other video I wanted to recommend is Hannah's Books, did kind of the opposite, and as a big reader who was not overly invested in the film, went casually to go see the film and did a response video on viewing the film of the Odyssey and how you might come at it as a reader of the work. So I really liked pairing those 2 together. They were a perfect complement, I think. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is kind of an odd kismet moment in a video that I wanted to talk about, and then we sort of had some real world news that connects nicely. So the video is from Sean Breathe's Books, and he did this wonderful discussion of Hungarian literature, which I'm not overly familiar with. So this exposed me to a lot of really new, exciting books that I want to check out. But I'm always a champion for anything international and translated coming into the English publishing market. Love that. And actually next month is Women in Translation Month. And I think my TBR next month will primarily be women in translation stuff. So be aware, that's coming up next week probably, and will be a pile of translated works. But this was a great video. Highly recommend checking it out if you have any interest in translated work or stuff coming from outside of the US or UK. So that was great, but by chance, tied into something happening in Hungary politically that I think has mainly flown under the radar. And so I wanted to specifically mention it because it's kind of hopeful news, happy news, where effectively a few months back, Hungary had this major election to remove their very extreme oppressive prime minister, Orban, and that succeeded to many cheers around the world, but especially from the Hungarian people. The people voted and had that outcome respected. And so many things in Hungary have been akin to or connected to things going on in the US right now. And very much that's where the US is leaning toward. And so that's been a hopeful picture of what can still happen within the circumstances. So this week, that new prime minister used the law, the legal system there, to successfully do what amounts to a vote of no confidence against their president, who was also an ally of Orban's, and removed him. And so this I have hardly seen mentioned anywhere, but it's such a testament to the fact that it's been a few months and things are turning in the right direction. And we are seeing the rule of law really re-engage in what was a massively corrupted system. And so things very much are turning around and getting on the right track there. And so it was just such a powerful moment to see it wasn't just that one day of the vote and then it disappeared. It is actually getting on track, and the rule of law is prevailing there. So I wanted to bring that up if you have not heard about that. It's a big deal and a pretty serious moment for things moving forward in Hungary. So yeah, amazing news. So anyway, that I think is everything, including my random news corner. So I hope you have a wonderful week in reading and in life, and thank you so very much for watching.